and welcome to Building Writers, getting students excited about writing from grades K or even pre-K through to grade 6. Hello, I am Ruth Rumack. I am the Executive Director of Education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, and I am so excited today to be joined by Kira Dreymanis, who is one of our Associate Directors of Education and has had her hand in just about every writing program that we have created through Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. So, hi, Kira.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here tonight. I'm so glad that your children are taken care of and that you can spend the hour with us.
I'm here, absolutely. They're sorted. They're going to have a movie night.
Awesome. So I just wanted to welcome everybody and let you know that we are recording tonight's session. So in a few days, it will be posted and you can go back and listen to all the tidbits again. And we will also be sending out after today's webinar a handout that has a whole bunch of information based on what we're talking about this evening, plus extras. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox and make sure that you take a look at it because it's going to be full of good stuff. I want to tell you a little bit about Ruth Rumack's Learning Space before we begin. And also, while we're sort of getting everybody ready, everybody's joining us, do me a favor, if you will, and share with me how old or what grade your child is in. And if you have questions as we go along, save them because we will have some time at the end. We'll have lots of time for questions at the end. And thank you to anybody who's joining us who has already sent in a question, because that way we get to answer them ahead of time and we know what you're looking for. So if you want to put into the chat how old your child is or what grade they're in, and maybe even one thing that you're hoping to get out of this evening, that would be wonderful, because I mean, we have a whole lot of stuff planned, but it's always nice to know who is with us live and what they're looking for. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and do that. Let's talk a little bit about Ruth Rumack's Learning Space briefly. We are an academic support center. We work with students as young as kindergarten and sometimes earlier, as early as 3, all the way through to the end of high school and into university. We have a wide range of certified teachers that work with us. They are full-time with us. This is their passion, working one-on-one with students and in small groups. And we provide a direct instruction model or method. We teach things very explicitly. We use multimodal and multisensory education, which means that we are getting all parts of the brain and the body to work together, and we're doing it with a lot of fun, I must say. You know, when you walk through the halls at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, or you walk through the halls and you listen to our online lessons, they're full of activity, they're full of movement, and they're full of joy, which is the thing that I love the most. So let's talk about writing, because we know that writing is a challenge for many students. We know that there are lots of kids who have tons of great ideas. They're so creative, they're so capable, and yet when it comes to their written output, what shows up on the paper, it doesn't match what they are either capable of orally or what we would like them to be able to share based on their ability. So let's start at the beginning. Kira, you have an SK student at home, so you have like your own little microcosm, and you've been teaching for many, many years. So I'm sure it's been interesting for you to watch the development of your child in this process as he's getting to that writing stage. Let's talk about how writing skills develop in those early years.
Absolutely. So yeah, I do. I have a son in SK Baz, and I've always loved teaching writing, as you said. And so it's been so cool to watch it from a parent perspective. So I think writing begins with imaginary play, right? With storytelling. That's the very first thing, the very first part. So luckily for me, my son was born with lots to say, you know, he never stops. And so even before JK, sometimes I would offer to be his hands and to write the stories down, and that we could then move, you know, share with family, share with friends. My mom did that actually all the time with me too when I was little, and I have really great memories of that time with her. And writing like this with my son, watching him, it's just really started to develop his belief in himself as somebody with this big creative brain full of great ideas that are worth sharing. But I will say we ran into a bit more trouble as we started with the letter formation stuff, the printing. My son has some fine motor challenges, and I would say a pretty low tolerance for frustration, although maybe that's just being 5, I don't know. So we've
Could
been
be.
working, maybe both, right? But anyway, we've been working on building his hand muscles, doing lots of fine motor stuff, and then also actually working our way through a program that we use all the time at RLS, which is handwriting without tears.
Right. And that's the
Mhm.
physical writing. We're talking about
That's
holding
correct.
the
Yeah.
pencil. So, I really appreciate that you have separated his ability to form letters, which is that technical part of it,
Mhm.
with his creativity and getting his ability really building his ability to express himself. And I mean, we see this in our work all the time with students
Mhm.
throughout the elementary years, that a child, as I said, has fantastic ideas, so creative, super excited to tell a story. But when you ask them to write it down or to get it down in some way, whether that's paper and pencil or computer, etc., it's different. It's a completely different story. And I think as we're talking about the skills that are involved in writing, I'm struck by the word writing and the fact that it has so many different meanings and connotations. And when I think about writing, I think about all the different parts. So we have the graphomotor, we have the actual writing of the letters,
Mhm.
we have the creative component, the coming up with ideas, whether they're creative ideas or fact-based ideas. We have the element of spelling. We have the element of grammar, punctuation, and then, of course, there's focus and attention, which we need to harness in order to get our ideas to fruition.
Mhm.
So, I know in our work and in our day to day, we see so many challenges with these. Any one of these skills can lead to a reluctant writer. And I think for so many students, writing can quickly become a daunting task. They may not know how to begin and they feel frozen, or they may rush to get it over with so
Yeah,
that
I
they
see
can
that a
just get
lot.
through it. Let's break the skills down that are involved in writing so that we can give our listeners a little bit more detail in each area.
Sure. So, as I said earlier about Baz, I think the first skill writers need to develop is the ability to generate ideas, right? They need to have something they want to communicate. The good thing, though, is that most people have lots to say to an interested audience. And so I think the task for parents and for educators as well is just to meet that child's ideas with enthusiasm, right? To be excited and to develop their confidence that their ideas are worth listening to or that they have value. And then, as we've already touched on as well, the next one is graphomotor, right? So they need to learn how to hold a pencil. They need to learn how to maintain the pressure on the page, how to correctly form each letter, that sort of thing. And once they've learned how to form all of their letters, they also need to start thinking about writing endurance, right? So young children are still building the literal muscle strength in their hand, and they can get tired so easily.
It's funny that you say that because
Mm.
just a few days ago, I saw on Instagram, on my Instagram feed, there was a picture of hand x-rays of children
Yeah.
ages 2 through to 7 every year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it reminded me how different a child's bones, like just the bone structure, the space between the bones, the strength, like the depth of those bones, and how
Mhm.
different they are between a child who's 5 and a child who's 7 or 8. And it reminded me also, when students have difficulties holding that pencil, how challenging that can be and how it really can be a roadblock to getting their ideas out because of that endurance and because of just, not enjoying it. It's not fun when you can't do it easily.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really thinking about that connects to our third skill, which is you need to be able to sit still, right? That's a developmental one to a certain point as well. You need to sit still and manage your focus long enough to complete the task. And we all know, parents and teachers, that this can be really hard for some kids, some more than others. At this point, my son has maybe 10 minutes in him, I would say, before he's done, and we're not getting any further. And forcing kids to sit down for long periods of time before they're ready to do that is almost a surefire way to create a reluctant writer. So we're going to talk a lot more later this evening as well about strategies to avoid that or how to get around it when you do
I
have
love
writing
it.
you've got to do.
I love it. And the thing that I think about when you're talking about this is that it's not just, you're using your son as an example. That's
Of course.
you're living proof. But we see students all the way through, even into high school,
Oh,
that
yeah.
still struggle with these things and still struggle with that endurance and still struggle with maintaining their focus, along with all of the other pieces, the spelling and all of it.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
it's not just a young child thing. It actually can persist for quite some time without some good intervention.
Well,
So,
and sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, what I find too is that the way we feel about writing right from those early years is going to carry through and have an impact, right? And so as kids are getting older, they're carrying all of these memories and experiences of writing and how that went and how it felt with them.
Yeah.
And so as they get older, you certainly still can get in there and help and fix it up, right? But you need to acknowledge the fact that maybe they're coming from a place of remembering, finding this really, really hard in the younger grades.
Sometimes even traumatic, I think.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
That we can't belittle that, especially for older students who have struggled with reading or writing for a number of years. When you ask them to sit down and write something, there can be actual panic and a fight, flight, or freeze response. But we're going to talk about that later. I'm jumping ahead. Okay.
That's great.
So we start with generating ideas, and then we move into having to get those ideas into a permanent form. That could be by handwriting, that could be by typing or dictating either into a device or dictating to somebody who's going to scribe for us. And then we have focus. What comes next?
So, well, next, students need to learn how to organize their ideas, right? So this is the part where they're thinking about structure. And this is where we're maybe in the middle elementary grades starting to think more about this. And so you're learning about the beginning, middle, and end of a story, for example. You're learning about how to write a paragraph with the topic sentence, the concluding sentence. You've got your details, your examples, all of these pieces. And then, of course, another writing skill that can create a lot of anxiety is spelling, right?
Yes.
And then finally, as you had said above, you have to master the mechanics of writing, right? There's the punctuation, grammar, sentence structure, and all of the rest of it. So it's a lot to think about. It really is.
It really is a lot to think about it. I think it's important to recognize, again, that the challenges with those particular skills, graphomotor, spelling, attention, those will almost always limit idea generation.
Yeah.
and general written expression, overall. So the quantity and quality of writing are diminished when kids have sore hands, they're anxious to spell a word, they're exhausted from managing their attention impulses all day. Students are trying to bring these things together, which can really reduce their output. And unfortunately, that is the thing that is being assessed at school. And the students that we see, who are hesitant writers or reluctant writers, they are not able to show what they know. And so much of school is based on show what you know. And if you're not showing it in the way that the teacher is asking you to show it, you are not being validated for it. You're not getting the marks. I mean, the school is all about the marks. So you're not getting the marks for it. And you're also, it's unfortunate that the system is only designed to give them credit when they can show it in the way that the teacher asks.
Definitely. And we haven't even spoken yet about kids with like diagnosed challenges in any of these areas.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many LDs that have an effect on writing output. We talk about dyslexia or reading challenges, dysgraphia, which is the graphomotor part, working memory. If you have a weak working memory and you can't hold on to that information long enough to put it down, and then it leaves your brain, you've got to start right back at the beginning. And then, of course, the focus and attention, which is executive functioning and ADHD. So these challenges can definitely cause anxiety for many students. But
yeah,
they in themselves, the anxiety can also look like some of those other things. So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle. And, it's hard sometimes to separate where the challenge is.
Yeah, anxiety has such a way of making people feel just stuck, right? Or frozen, as you had alluded to earlier. And I do think that's especially true for kids with learning challenges or a history of feeling that these things are difficult.
Mm-hmm. So to help these students overcome their anxiety about writing, I believe that we need to create a safe space for them to take the risks that will allow them to grow. they need to be able to make mistakes. They need to feel supported. And this is, where teachers and parents come in by supporting them and supporting this idea of a growth mindset. We talk about this at Ruth Remax Learning Space all the time. This is the power of not yet or yet, depending on which end of it you're at. So when a student tells us, I can't do that, we remind them to add that yet. Well, you can't do that yet. We're working on it. That's what practice is for. And that's what making mistakes are for. And that's what I'm here for you for, so that you can have that opportunity to make those mistakes and then try again and see where you go the next time. So outside of anxiety, what do you think is another big block for students as writers?
I think they don't know where to start. I think that's an enormous part of it. So the teacher says, okay, everyone, write a paragraph about your weekend. And the kid is sitting there in class, right? And they look around and all their friends are pulling out paper, pulling out pencils, getting right to work maybe. Yeah. And they can just feel so overwhelmed, right? And they freeze. There's no path. Absolutely.
I think the best way to solve that problem of getting started is to have an explicit path. And I often find in teaching writing, there's a pervasive graphic organizer out there.
Here
it comes. It's called the hamburger paragraph. And if you in the audience have ever seen it, you've used it, it's come home with your kid. I'm sorry that you've been exposed to the hamburger paragraph, because it is a metaphor for writing a paragraph or, a bigger essay, but it's not explicit enough. And if you can see in the picture, we've got the top bun and the bottom bun, topic, introduction and conclusion. You've got a bunch of stuff in the middle, the meat and the what else, tomatoes and whatever else are in there that create the main points. But there's nothing that tells a student, how do you write your introduction? Where do you begin? How do you show examples? How do you put all these pieces together to make something that's cohesive? So, at RRLS, we are all about direct instruction. We're about explicit teaching, breaking things down, pulling them apart and putting them back together. And I really believe that this type of instruction, you need to make expectations crystal clear, and you need to support your students every step of the way until they achieve mastery, until they really get it and it just becomes naturally part of what they do. So we wanted to offer our students something more. And Kira, this is where you've come in, really helping to co-create a number of our writing programs, our power writing programs. And I would love to share with our listeners a little bit about how we've innovated this idea of the hamburger paragraph, thrown it out with the garbage. Sorry, that's terrible to say. Thrown it out and started fresh with something that is much more poignant, specific, and explicit.
Yeah, sure. So at RLS, as you said, we really specialize in breaking down processes. I think that's the center of so much of it. We just really love teasing apart all those skills and just focusing on one thing at a time, which lets kids take things on at the pace that's right for them as they're ready, right? Yep. And in creating these programs, we really wanted to make something very structured that included checklists and graphic organizers. Let's take the guessing out. Your child will know what to do next, that feeling, right? They'll know. They can check it off and then they know what's next. And as we repeat this, we're building confidence. And we also wanted to include a lot of hands-on activities and multisensory learning, right? So to avoid that sitting and writing by yourself in a room with everybody else silent, instead to be able to stand up and still be working on my paragraph, that kind of an idea has made an enormous difference too.
I would say that the writing process really takes center stage. And what I love about these programs is how explicit and step-by-step they are. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely.
The explicitness. That's the key word for tonight, explicit.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of the writing process in particular, I can show you again here.
Yeah, let's see some of that.
I'll share my screen here. 1 second. Sorry, everybody. I'm going to do it this way. Sorry. Here we go. So we even have our own acronym, right? You're talking about the process. Yes. And we use Bowie, and you can see our lovely little Bowie mascot who even has the cool eye makeup over there. And our Bowie stands for brainstorm, organize, write, improve, edit. So the ideas are these are the steps. These are the steps to write anything well, really, right? And I often talk to parents about, let's separate the thinking from the writing, right? So first, we're gathering our ideas. Now we're choosing our best ideas and putting them in order. And as we work through this process, kids are starting to see, oh, like this is what I can do, and create work that they feel really proud of. And then here as well on the other side, you can see our writing programs that we've created now. So we have Power Sentences, which is of course dealing with sentence structure. Kids then move on to Power Paragraphs, then Persuasive Power, onto Opinion Essay. And then as they're in high school, we have essay writing programs as well for the older grades. So I want to show just a few examples of beautiful power paragraphs here that students have written at RLS. You can see lovely one, A Passion for Sloths, and another one all about the TTC and taking the bus, the joys of taking the bus. And you can see both of these have that structure, right? A teacher who's looking for the hamburger model will be happy. They're going to get their checks. They're going to get their marks. But for the kid, you can see there's a lot more detail. There's a lot more enthusiasm here. And especially, I love this TTC example, right? So there are all these like sensory details. I love feeling the warm air on my neck, which I think is a bit weird on the bus, but this child loves it, right? It's lovely. And you can just see kids feel really confident by the end of these programs. That's what I find. They know what to do. And they can take it back to their classroom and use it there.
That's it. That's the thing that I like, is that it's transferable. And even if, as you said, the classroom teacher is looking for the hamburger paragraph, they're looking for, beginning, middle, and introduction with the conclusion with stuff in the middle, they're going to get it, and they're going to get more. But
absolutely,
the thing that you mentioned, the joy that the kids feel, the confidence that they get as they're going through it, because they know what comes next. And I remember, we teach a lot about transition words, getting from one idea to the next. And we give our students a whole list of transition words that they can pull out of their pocket at any time. And I love, there was a student, he's got to be like post-university by now. He's got to be in his 30s, because I've been doing this for so long, that he said to me when we first started working on the writing stuff, he said, oh, and his mother was working on her PhD at the time. And he said to me, oh, my writing suddenly sounds so university-like. And he was in grade 5. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. It really does. And that was because of the magic of the transition words that we
furthermore, and suddenly you feel so grown up or whatever.
Exactly. So
yeah. No, it's great.
I love it in action. Okay. So we've elaborated on what some of the difficulties might be, the roadblocks might be, and why we think being explicit is so important. So now what can we share with parents or other educators, whoever's with us tonight? How can parents and educators support the children that they're working with?
So because, as we've said, there's so many different skills involved in writing, I think the first step for a parent is to reflect on what area is the challenge, right? What's the issue for your child? And nobody will know that as well as the person who's sitting beside them, trying to get them through this book report or whatever it is, Right. So if we start with brainstorming, this is one part of the writing process where the child doesn't actually have to sit down at all. And actually getting up, right? Getting up and getting moving is a great way to just let go of the perfectionism, right? Just let the ideas flow. And everyone, for the record, who's attending this webinar is going to get a nice handout that lays all this stuff out in detail as well. So we'll just go through a few of our best ideas. But my first idea for brainstorming is to think about making it into a game. So for example, you can try brainstorming basketball, right? And you can tell your child that for every idea they come up with, we're going to shoot the ball, right? Take a shot on net. And maybe the parent will be in charge then of writing those ideas down. And then if the child gets stuck, it's a great time for maybe the parent to jump in with some of their own ideas, especially if you're willing to get a bit silly with it.
Silly is so important. It is so important. I think for so many kids, they're grumpy. They could be grumpy. I'm thinking of my own child. There could be some grumpiness. She's in grade 8 this year. And I have an older son who's 30. So we've been through all the stages and all the ages and all the levels of education you could possibly imagine. And I think when you come at it as a parent, the supporting person with a lightheartedness and hey, let's just, let's leave the worry aside. We're going to put that in a box, close the lid. We're going to put it to the side, and let's just be fun with it. Let's just brainstorm our little hearts out and come up with even some really silly things that may or may not work, but at least we've got somewhere to start.
Yeah. And you're modeling lightness, right? Like we can just throw ideas out there. There's no problem, right? People often tell kids there are no bad ideas, but it doesn't feel that way, right? It's
Right.
like, it doesn't feel that way. And you're sitting there and you're stuck on brainstorming. So the way to do it is just to joke, to play, and to take it easy. And along the same lines, I think my second suggestion that I wanted to mention is to really lean into a child's passions, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a kid like I do who can't stop talking about Pokemon or Minecraft or whatever it is, get them to brainstorm a list of reasons, right? Ask them about why.
I love it. I love diving deep into a student's passions. And from that, I mean, as we said, you know your kid best. You know what interests them, what sparks their interest, and what gets them to talk.
Yeah.
So the more that they can talk about it or even teach you about something, then it's going to give them that confidence, and also the experience of success.
Absolutely. And an extension of that idea too is to acknowledge your child's expertise in something, right? Like, what can they teach you? What follow-up questions can you ask that will really show that you're interested in hearing more about it? That kind of focused attention, I know, can feel like such a gift to our kids when we are ready to listen to what they want to tell us about. And it's a great way to show them that we think they're smart. We think their ideas have value and are
I
worth
love
sharing.
that. So we have all these fantastic ideas flying at us. How can we keep track of all these great brainstormed ideas?
I think that's such a great question. And it's usually the challenge for the really verbal kid who isn't writing anything, right? Is how do I capture it?
Yeah.
But there are lots and lots of options. So it's fun to get creative with it. So you can encourage your child to draw out their ideas, right? You can take the dog on a walk and use the voice record feature on your phone and record a great brainstorming conversation, maybe for a presentation for school or something similar. Or even, actually, Ruth, you shared this with me initially, but grab a bunch of whiteboard markers, invite your child to write all over the living room window, right?
I cannot tell you how many times my entire living room window has been full of mind map,
I
spider
love
web,
it. Yeah.
all the different pieces, and then cartoons. And my daughter loved to draw. She still loves to draw. So there were always little doodles going on at the same time. And sometimes I would actually keep them up on the window for much longer than they needed to be, just because I liked them. And I just loved her creativity and to see the passion that she brought to it in that form. If I asked her to do the same thing sitting down at the table, it would not look the same or have the same detail. So I found
it's
it
just whatever works, right? It's making that space. And then the last one I wanted to share is there are a lot of amazing apps for this, right? A favorite that we use all the time at RLS is Inspiration. So again, I'm going to share my screen here and show.
I love Inspiration.
Love it. It is
I
so
love
great.
it for so many different reasons. So tell us what we're looking at right now.
I will. So you can see here on the left is this mind map. So Inspiration is essentially a mind map app, except that you can use dictation, right? So kids can speak right into these bubbles with their voice with just the dictation feature on the iPad or whatever. They have all these great images you can add, which sometimes people want to use. And then my very favorite part personally is you click one button. So if you see the little lines at the top left there, you click and it turns into a point form outline, right? So it's gone from the sort of the mind map to the organized stage. It's beautiful.
I actually think like that is it's part of its selling feature, which it goes from the visual to something that's very structured and easy to follow. And when I've shown kids that one button that switches it, honestly, it's like jaws drop. Sometimes even tears come to their eyes because it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't have to do that myself. It does it for me. So
there's so much recopying often for young kids.
Right. Yeah. And on top of that, you have that, as you were saying, the voice aspect of it. So I love using alternatives to keep track of ideas, and especially for kids who have that graphomotor or attention challenge, or are just really reluctant, or maybe they're perfectionists. And when they write it down themselves, they're doing a lot of erasing and rewriting and erasing and rewriting. This kind of removes it from them. And I really expect that we would use these alternatives not only for the brainstorming, but they can be used throughout the entire writing process. It's not just at that beginning stage, which I find really helpful. We often speak to parents who are concerned about using some kind of technology with their children, because they're afraid that the children who have challenges in that area will rely on it entirely, and that they'll never learn to write by hand, or they'll never learn to do the brainstorm any other way. And I would challenge that thinking, because in my experience, you may start out that way and you learn the skill that way, but as you go through it, you gain skill, you gain confidence, you gain success, and you gain maturity. And as you mature, your ability changes and your skill set changes, and therefore your reliance on the technology will also change. But it is a fantastic place to start when we have reluctant writers or reluctant readers. I really think about it as just adding another tool to that child's toolbox, and they get to use it whenever they need to. And it's not an either or decision. Either I use it or I don't. You can actually, and this is what we do in our work, we kind of build it in seamlessly. So, well, we're going to talk about that after, but let's show an example.
I'll show you an example. Here we go.
We're going to show an example of the ability to dictate something as opposed to handwrite it. So this was the first time that I met this student. We were doing an assessment. He was in grade 5 at the time. He was diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's. So attention was really challenging for him. Also, he was so verbal and so creative and had such amazing ideas when we talked about it, but he had graphomotor issues as well. So when we went to write it by hand, it was very challenging for him. And my screen is really small. I'm going to try and see what I can do to make my screen
I
big.
can read sort of what we can see if you want, but you'll remember more of it than I will.
I do. Okay. So basically, the question was, what would happen if children ruled the world? And he was very adamant that it was not going to be a good idea. He said things like the world would end. Can you see more, Kira?
I don't know if I'm going to guess. Does that say Satan? I don't know.
Yes, it could. It could. I have to say, he was very, very passionate about this, that he did not think that children should rule the world at all.
I can see war, more war.
Yeah.
And some money worth nothing. That's my guess. Right. The last sentence.
So you can see that there were some really significant challenges with his written output. And if he had just handed this in to a teacher for marks, there would be very little at grade 5 level, that they could give him for that. So then I said, okay, we're going to do an experiment. Why don't we try typing, your ideas? So we used the handwritten, and then he used the keyboard to type his ideas. And we can see in the next slide what that looked like. And Kira, maybe you can read that one out.
Sure, I'll read it. So here, I'll move my own little things here. It says, if children ruled the world, then a dictatorship would happen. Maybe immediately? Is that?
Yes, I think
I'm
so.
Guessing. Immediately.
Yep.
People tricked into handing off their something.
Their money. Yep.
Okay. Kids would be killing kids, drug addicts. The apocalypse, I love that. There's some creative spelling right there. Could happen. Don't let kids rule the world.
So again, very passionate. And you can see from the handwritten to the typed that there was a lot more detail. You could see his vocabulary coming out. Mm-hmm. We turned the spell check off. So that was a true reflection of where he was with his spelling. But again, not quite grade 5 level. So then I said, let's try this. And this was early on when dictation was very new. Again, this child has probably finished university at this point.
Shall I skip to the next one?
Skip to the next one. And we're going to just see, we don't have to read the whole thing out loud, but you can just see the quality of the writing, the depth of the sentences, the sentence structure, the vocabulary that he used, it all changed. And what hit home for me that day was, holy mackerel, that this assistive technology was a game changer for him, that had he not had that opportunity to share his ideas with voice dictation, how could that teacher know how much amazing stuff was in his head? And that was really, I think, one of the days that I was like, this stuff is gold, and it will change people's lives, and we have to find a way to work it into everything that we do. And from that day, which was probably over 10, 12 years ago, that's what we do. We use it every day for all kinds of different things. So that's sort of a little PSA announcement about assistive technology. If you want more information about assistive technology, you can check out through our YouTube channel. We did another assistive technology webinar several months ago. So if you go through our catalog, you'll find it with tons and tons of other types of assistive technology tools and why they're so useful. So let's go back to this. One thing I just want to say in conclusion, in terms of overlapping different kinds of technologies for the writing process, one thing that we like to do is perhaps use voice to text for idea generation and the first draft, just getting your ideas out. And then we switch to the computer to edit that first draft and to, do all of the spelling check and the grammar check and the punctuation, the mechanics of it. And then, so that we don't lose that practice of handwriting, once that is in its best form, we will ask the student sometimes to handwrite from that good final copy into their own handwriting. So they're still getting the handwriting practice. They're still getting the practice with, putting the punctuation in the right places, but they're using the model that they've created where they're not stuck on, how do I spell this? Does the sentence sound right? We leave that really to the end, which is part of our Bowie process. So
Well, that's it. It's again, just one thing at a time.
yeah,
Right.
not to overwhelm. And then
Yeah.
they're really proud of their written product because it's at a level and at a stage where they didn't have to agonize over all of the different parts.
Mhm.
All right, we're going to switch topics. So Kira, what can parents do to help kids with attention challenges completing written tasks?
So this one can be really challenging. I would say this is one we hear from parents very, very frequently. Overall, I would say I think it comes down to working with your child instead of against your child, right?
Yeah.
These things can feel like such a battle. So the first thing to think about is time. Parents are often really tempted to push the kid to just sit at the table until the homework is done, right? That's a very common approach, and makes sense a lot of the time. But when you've got a child with attention challenges and this has turned into this big battle every night, sometimes it's nice to think about taking the total opposite approach, right? So I would suggest starting by observing your child. How long can they realistically sit and work on some writing right now?
Yeah, I like that you said right now because it
Mhm.
will change. And as they mature and their confidence increases and their skill increases, they
Of
will be
course.
able to focus for longer. If it's only 10 minutes at the beginning, stick with the 10 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So once parents have figured out the maximum amount of time that maybe that the child is able to focus on these kinds of tasks, I would say try to plan writing sessions that are just like a few minutes shorter, right, than that
Yep.
max.
Yep.
So your child can experience success, and you as a family can experience what does it feel like when homework doesn't end in a massive tantrum for once. It just avoids these long, unproductive, really frustrating homework sessions, and it usually means the child's going to be more willing to come to the table the next time, which is the goal, right? We're thinking long term here. Something that can help a lot with this is timers, especially visual timers,
Yep.
that the child can see those minutes ticking along. So you set the timer, and when it beeps, no matter what, we're done. We're done. We're stopping now. And then I would just say, take a minute to look at what your child was able to accomplish, even if it doesn't look like much, and just celebrate that together.
I love ending on a high note. That's like, mic drop, I'm out of here. Come
Yeah.
back next time fresh and excited.
Yeah, it's a game changer. It makes things feel so different. So then once parents have figured out the time issue, I think the next step is to think about making the expectations as clear as they possibly can. I think, especially with homework assignments, this is really, really important. And I saw in it at the beginning in the chat, a lot of people had kids in grade 5. I saw a few of those pop up, right?
Yep.
And we're starting to see these longer homework assignments, speeches, presentations, this kind of thing. And often kids feel just totally overwhelmed by what is expected of them. And the reality is, this is just going to be where checklists, graphic organizers, and examples of completed work come in. I think students who are having a hard time managing their attention at home are pretty likely to have missed some important details in the classroom as well, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of distractions there. It's a very overwhelming space. And so having something visual to refer to when they get stuck just makes a huge difference.
I really agree. Having a model really makes all that difference. And it's not there to copy from directly, but it certainly helps a child frame what the expectations look like at the end. And when I work through models with our students, with my own kids, we read it together, we pull it apart, we work backwards. So, if we are working on the introduction, then we're going to zero in on that introduction and say, well, what transition word did they use? Or
Mhm.
how did they get from, their big idea to narrowing it down to the focus that they're going to use in their essay, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So having that example, not all teachers will provide an example, but I'm quite confident that looking online, you could find some types of examples based on whatever it is that you're writing, or using a reference book, or all sorts of things. I'm not even going to talk about Chat GPT right now. That's a
Oh
whole
no,
other thing. I think
that'd be another webinar,
the other
hey?
day, another day. But the fact that you can pull something apart and then help the child zero in on, well, what made that sentence so terrific, or catch your attention, we can
Mhm.
use that and work backwards from there. What else can parents do for children who have trouble focusing?
Make it feel important. That's my big one as well, right? So I've had some success with very reluctant writers. And I do this assignment where I say, okay, think of a rule. Think of a rule in your life that you follow that is not fair, right? So I'm not allowed to bring my magic cards out at recess, or I'm not allowed to have a cell phone till next year, or whatever it is. And then I have them do some writing, right? Argue your case. So think about the person in charge of that rule. Let's write them a letter, or let's plan a presentation for them, which I will say, incidentally, is how my brother and I convinced our mom to get us a dog when we were
I think
kids.
that's brilliant. So
It
brilliant.
worked. It was great. Absolutely. So then lastly, I think parents can help their kids by being open-minded about what writing looks like. We have this picture in our mind of somebody sitting quietly at a desk, but think about the child in front of you. Where are they most comfortable? Do they want to work on the floor? Do they want to work in their play tent? Can you tape a huge piece of craft paper up on the wall and let them write that way? I think, just if you invite your child to join you in the problem solving, to think about what is going to make it easier for them, you're more likely to find solutions that work for everyone. And again, it's that idea of working together instead of as opponents in this homework battle.
I completely agree. And, in our house, you'll see all kinds of strange places that we do our homework or brainstorming or work. And when the weather gets nicer, it's really nice to go outside with a little fresh air as well.
Mhm.
So,
Definitely.
okay, those are very tangible ideas. And I love the idea of being creative about how sitting down to write can look when we're not even having to sit down.
Mhm.
We talked about the brainstorming. We talked about how to get ideas onto paper, about how to keep our kids' attention. Let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty details, which this could be a controversial subject: spelling.
Yeah.
And I know that there is a shift. There has been a shift in our school system away from spelling. There are ideas about inventive spelling. How long should you use inventive spelling? Should you be correcting your child's spelling? Um, I feel, and from my experience, that worrying about spelling in those first drafts, that idea generation and getting that first draft out, can really slow the ideas down. It impedes the flow of ideas. And my feeling is that we go back and look at the spelling after the first draft is written, and it's
Mhm.
part of a supported editing process where we're using checklists. There's a systematic approach. We may use something called COPS, which stands for capitalization, omissions, punctuation, spelling, or CUPS. Some other schools use the word CUPS. So whatever acronym you use, you apply it in a systematic way after that first draft has been created. And when you're ready to work on spelling, rather than spelling words for your child as they go along, or, yes, you can encourage them to try. You can encourage them to just sound out, put down the sounds that they hear, which is a more of a phonetic approach. Once you go back and you check the spelling, I like to do it again in a systematic way that is not all about just hitting that spell check button, but
Mhm.
having a little conversation and keeping track of the words that the child is spelling incorrectly over a period of time, so that we have sort of a practice. We can go back to practice those particular things, and we can teach them in a more systematic way. Um, that whole side of things, the phonics instruction and what we're now calling teaching heart words, which are high frequency words, which have strange spelling patterns that we can teach partly by heart, but partly by phonetics or by sound. Those are all things that we do in our daily work with our students. sometimes I think that nitty gritty is challenging for a parent to do. So if you need help with that, definitely give us a call.
Yes.
But moving on from the mechanics of it, which we want to do after the first draft, what are some ways that we can really keep the writing relevant and fun for our kids?
Oh, there's so many, right? So, of course, creative writing is a great place to start. You can sometimes motivate kids who aren't so sold on the idea of creative writing by asking them to write a story about a favorite character, right? From whatever, from a video game, from a TV show. So, for example, again, my son has sometimes written alternate endings to books where he wasn't satisfied with how things wrapped up. Of course, dictated, right, or scribed by me. But also I had an older student previously who was a very reluctant writer, I think maybe grade 6-ish, but passionate about Minecraft and the world of Minecraft, right?
Yes.
And so we did some reading about Minecraft, and then he ended up writing this amazing story that all took place in the world of Minecraft. And I learned a lot about Minecraft at the time, which was great as well. And then for kids who like to draw, I think planning and writing comics can be incredibly motivating and lots of fun. And once they're finished, comics or stories, you can publish it, right? You can photocopy it and share it with friends and family. And it makes kids feel so proud.
Oh my gosh, there's nothing better than giving kids a chance to share what they have done, and that validation when they hand it off to other people that they haven't been
Right.
working on it with, awesome presents for grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, just to share. And just on that note of the comics, I know that there are a lot of different apps and
Yes,
things
that's
that you
true.
can get online that you can actually create the story. They have the bubbles with the speech bubbles, and you can do a whole creative comic workshop right online too.
That's true. And I've actually previously with a student used to do a lot just with Google Images and pasting them into a Google Doc,
Yep.
And so
Yep.
we'd have his little, that he would dictate his little bit of the story, and then we'd find a picture that showed, because he didn't like to draw, that showed that story. And he was very, very excited when they were finished.
Excellent. Any other gems for us?
You can write instruction manuals for your imaginary inventions, maybe. You can write clues for a treasure hunt, joke books, family writing contests, right? There are all sorts of things.
I think the
Um,
thing we want to hit home is that the writing process can be applied to any number of situations, not just your typical paragraph or
Yeah.
3 or 5 paragraph essay. That this idea of Bowie, brainstorm, organize, write, improve, and then edit,
Yeah.
that can be applied to just about everything. And doesn't mean that every single piece of writing has to follow all of it. Sometimes you just do a rough draft of something and it's left and you move on to the next thing.
Mhm.
But having that process helps kids stay focused and helps them reach their goals with much less anxiety, I would say.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to open it up actually. Well, two things I want to do. First, I just want to remind people, we can put a slide about
Sure. Yeah.
us up there, that just to remind people, what we're all about. We're here for our students. We support students, not just in the writing process, but in all academic subjects. And since we're talking about the writing tonight, our writing programs are available both as group classes and one-to-one instruction. We do formal group classes where we're opening it up to everybody. And we also do private group classes. So if you have some siblings or cousins or friends in the neighborhood that want to get together and do a class, we can put that together as well. And just so that there are still spots available for our March break power paragraphs and our QWERTY classes. Those are our formal typing and keyboarding classes. So if anybody's interested, stick around afterwards. We can answer questions about those. Or you can go right on our website, www.ruthrumack.com, and find all of our group classes. What else? Do we have another slide, or is that the only
I
one?
think that's it. I think we were just going to chat about questions now.
Excellent. Okay. And then I know that we've got something, our next webinar. Yes, just so before I forget, that our next webinar is also on writing, but it's for our older grades, grade 7 to 12. And we're going to have another wonderful guest with us. Paula is going to join us. She works with our older students. And we are doing a building writers in March 9th, and Parent Power on April 27th. So that's all on our website too, or at least it should be and will be soon.
I'm sure.
Get information about that anyway. And if there's anything else that we can help you with, we are here, and we're going to stick around a little bit later. Okay, we've got in the chat, there's a sign up if you're interested for more workshops as well. So
Nice.
one thing that I want to talk about is, first of all, thank you to anybody who sent a question in early, because it gave us a chance to look at the questions. And we had a great question, which is, how do you get children to not be afraid to express themselves by writing so that they enjoy writing? I think we've talked a lot about lots of creative different ways that we can engage our students and keep it fun and to keep it relevant for them. But what else do you have to offer for that?
Well, I mean, I had when I read that question, I really, what came to mind was a very particular student of mine who I worked with for several years. She came to me, I think, the end of middle school, beginning of high school age, and came right through high school. And she had probably the most serious writing anxiety of anybody I've ever met.
Yeah.
Such an intelligent kid. And on her first day with me, she couldn't write a sentence. She wouldn't. And it was perfectionism.
I think she was already in grade 9, probably early grade 9.
Yeah, I think it was just before grade 9. She was just about to start. And it was perfectionism. She was so worried. She just kept saying, it'll be wrong. It'll be stupid. I don't want you to see. About anything. And so, of course, she'd have this experience of not handing in assignments again and again, and her teachers were annoyed with her. And she was a real, like, eager to please child. And it was really upsetting to watch. You know, she was in tears her first few lessons. And our breakthrough that actually got her writing was a game. So we played a storytelling game, which is called Fortunately, Unfortunately. We started just doing it out loud. I told her no writing today. We left the computer in the classroom. We went and sat outside on our patio at the little picnic table there at the previous office. And we played Fortunately, Unfortunately. So I would say, once upon a time, there was a pirate who was lonely. And she would say, fortunately, he had a parrot. And I would say, unfortunately, the parrot was a bully or something, right? And you go back and forth and tell a story as long as it was fun. But that first day, she was laughing, right? She was having a good time. Yes. And the next day she came, a few days later, I said, okay, we're going to play that game again, but this time let's type our sentences together. And she did. And it went really, really well. And she came that whole summer and continued to, you know, in school, have some issues with deadlines, have some issues with reluctance. It wasn't immediate. Yeah. But over time, it made such a difference. And it turned out was a very strong writer, which is kind of where that perfectionism, I think, was coming from. And now she's off at university having a blast, you know, and doing very well by all accounts. So
I love that.
It's amazing how those things can happen.
It really is. And just by changing it up, right? Not making it what writing should be, she was able to let go of that over time. Yeah, over time. Excellent. So I'm putting it out there to our audience. If you have any questions for us, please put them in the chat and we'll respond to them. And while you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to give you another question from somebody who wrote into us ahead. They said that they are looking for exercises and curriculum appropriate materials to improve our grade 5 sons' reading and writing performance at school. Perhaps that's one of our listeners today. And so I'm going to start with one comment first, that reading and writing performance are two connected but distinct things. And in order to answer that question and to make some really informed suggestions to you, I would really need to know more about this individual and their challenges, what's working for them, what's not working for them. But I would say that, you know, so many of the examples that we've given tonight would likely be helpful in at least getting things going. And in terms of exercises and curriculum appropriate material, there is a lot of stuff on the internet. A lot of it is hamburger paragraph. I just want to put that
Most,
out.
I think. But
I
yes.
know. And we, of course, are always available to be working with our students particularly in the writing realm, but we have direct instruction programs for reading as well. So if reading is an issue, spelling is an issue, written output is an issue, that's all something that we could build a curriculum for that child and work with them directly. So if you have further questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out. You would probably talk to Kira because she's one of
Chances are, yeah.
that's right. She's one of our intake coordinators. So reach out and we will certainly have a further conversation. But I would say that the power writing, if we're just looking at the writing aspect, would be a great place to start. Definitely. All right. Oh, I want to say something else that, you know, other parents also asked about our specific programs that they can find. And I want to say that, you know, the programs that we've created have been created specifically for reluctant writers, but they're universal in that they are good for all writers and all children at different, you know, stages in their writing. And they were really created to be welcoming, more welcoming than a traditional writing program. So we've kept in mind kids with LDs, whether they've been diagnosed or undiagnosed, and just students who may be feeling some anxiety around the writing process. The other thing I wanted to say that I was thinking about this afternoon, Kira, parents often ask me, should I correct my child's work? And this is something that we haven't talked about yet. And I often have conversations about, you know, well, my child does the first draft, and then I look at it and I make a whole bunch of corrections, and then they add, you know, they take those corrections and they rework them in, or sometimes the parent just does the corrections right on the document. And I know I saw your face, you're like,
that one, don't do that. But I think it's okay to help. That's my opinion, but you can say what you think.
Right. So there's a fine line between supporting and guiding and being a cheerleader and doing the work for the student. And especially in writing, I find like our students are not going to learn the skills that they need unless they get in there and they see why one transition word works better than another transition word. So my feeling is for any parent who wants to be in that supportive role, to do the editing with the student. So you're sitting side by side, or and what I do with even my own daughter is we do something on a Google Doc and we're both in the document at the same time so that I can see what she's doing and she can see if I made a suggestion where that might go. It's better than breathing down somebody's neck.
That's a very good idea.
Staring over their shoulder. It's a little less intimidating, but I find that if I say, you know what, let's read that sentence out loud. Tell me what you think. And she'll say, oh, no, that doesn't really work. Or I'll ask a leading question like, do you think that this sentence belongs here, or is there a better place for it somewhere else? So I'm not directly saying to her, that's not the right place for it, move it. I want her to come to those conclusions on her own. And this is the way that we work with our students as well. But I think editing with your child is important, but it's got to be guided and purposeful, not just mom takes your paper, crosses stuff out and changes it and then hands it back to you.
Yeah, I have interesting memories about this one myself because my mom's a writer, actually. So she did edit my work in high school, but not write in the documents. You know, she'd give me lots of comments, and it was enormously helpful. But I think what it comes down to is the dynamic between the parent and child and how it feels. Yeah. So if a child is truly reluctant, then sometimes an adult coming in and saying, oh, but this could be better and maybe change that, it's going to feel judgmental, right? Especially if there's anxiety there. So you know your child best. Look at the situation. It's better that they hand in something full of errors than that they ball it up and throw it in the garbage, right? Or something. And so you have to just kind of take the moment as it comes. But I really think, as you said, that editing together, providing some tools with my students, sometimes I'll say, oh, I see 2 missing commas. Can you find them? That kind of thing, or turn it into a game. I've taped the paragraph to the wall, the draft, and maybe we're playing a game and then coming and fixing that sort of thing. But it's just about, it's about thinking about what are your big picture goals here? How are we going to get this in and improve it as much as we can?
I also think, you know, especially in the early grades, and we have a lot of parents with students of grade 5. Grade 5 is a very transitional year. You're going, you know, from those elementary years into the early junior years, and the expectations change. And when those expectations change, you want the teacher to be able to see where your child is truly at. And if
Mhm.
you are the one going in and making all of those changes, or making changes without, the discussion with your child as to why that change might be helpful, the teacher cannot accurately see where that child is and therefore won't be able to support them in the best way possible. So, as I said, there's a balance
There's a
between,
real balance
yeah,
there.
there's a
Mhm.
fine line, and we have to find the balance around it.
If people go and see the assistive tech webinar at any point, watch it on YouTube, you'll learn more about the read and write tech sort of tool. But what I was going to say is you can have the child's writing read out loud to them, which is enormously helpful for editing, right? Because
Yeah.
kids who are having a hard time with reading too may just not see visually their errors, but listening can make a very, very big difference.
Oh, that is huge. So often when we've written something and we've been writing it for a long time, we've almost memorized it. And so when we go to check for errors, we don't notice that a word is missing, or that we've written the wrong word in that situation, or that we have a really long run-on sentence, because we know what we're trying to say.
Yes.
So having it read back to you either by another person or less judgmentally by the computer.
By a robot voice, right?
That's right. But
Mhm.
some of the robot voices are good. You can change
Mhm.
them a little.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the read and write, or read and write for Chrome, I think is
That's
what.
it. It's a Chrome
Yeah.
extension now. They used to have like Read and Write Gold as a separate program, but I think most people are just using the Chrome extension now.
Right. And if you're part of the TDSB, your child has access to that for free. And all you have to do is ask your teacher for the key in code, and you should be able to access that at any time. And it has a ton of features, including a bunch of other research and highlighting and collecting notes. Amazing,
I
amazing.
bet Paula will want to talk about it in the older writers one, but
I know.
absolutely, it's a
I know.
fabulous tool.
So exactly. So stay tuned for I think it's March 9th for, no, what was the next date? March 9th. Yeah, March 9th. Come
In the
back.
chat, I
We'll
think,
talk
yeah.
about those other things. But if you do want more information, yes, go check out our assistive technology webinar from a couple of months ago, and you'll see all sorts of different things. So before we wrap up here, and we're just at the right time, it's just after 8. I would love to get some comments back from the people who are watching. If there's one thing that you took from tonight's presentation, I would love to hear about it. It's validating for us because when you talk in a void, it's hard to know what people are getting from it. And it also helps us to streamline the talk for next time, because we like to talk about this topic a lot. So I would love some feedback. If there was one thing that stood out for you, go ahead and write it in the chat. And if there are any other questions, we will stick around and answer those as well. If somebody wants to talk to us face to face, I'm happy to take you off of mute and we can have a conversation once we wrap up. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you, Kira, so much for all of your wonderful advice and all of the expertise that you bring to our students, and for all of your incredible work on our writing programs. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. I've had such a good time. And honestly, this is work I love to do. And so it's fun to talk about it.
It is, isn't it? It's
is.
We could actually stay on for another hour and continue the
I got lots to say about writing.
So true.
Absolutely.
Well, if anybody has anything to add to that, I would love to see your chat. And if not, anybody out there in the void?
Reluctant writers. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
It's not an assignment.
Reluctant writers.
No.
No. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.